Hello, and welcome back to the 2024 World Chess Championship, contested by the champion Liren of China and the challenger Gukesh of India. It's game 6, the scores are tied. Today was a very fascinating game to watch, so let's have a look and see how it unfolded. So, Ding so far has played e4 and knight f3, but he plays a third opening now, d4, knight f6, and we get a London. Ding goes for a London, but not just any London today. You might think that the London is boorish, believe me, I thought so too until I saw this game. So we get typical London things. White looks to build this pawn pyramid with c3. You get the dark squared bishop outside, and like Gukesh has opted not for the reverse London, so he's going to be keeping his light squared bishop here, and we'll see how he's going to develop it later. Ding going to develop his knight, develop his knight, develop his bishop, and play a normal London or not. So we get c5, the most principled way to play against the London. c3, the bishop develops, but now you give this check. And this is the start of what is some cutting edge line, the Heston Blumenthal line, if you understand that reference of the London, where it is so complicated. Don't touch it if you don't know how to cook kind of line. So we get the knight blocking, but you take the bishop, and then you develop your queen out. So you don't castle yet. You trade off your bishop for the knight to disrupt the pawn structure, and you trade off the dark squared bishop. So black is left with this light squared bishop, which at the moment can't get out. I suppose it can go here, but that's not really a helpful square. And although black can castle, uh, you just slide back, and you are now threatening to take this pawn. Both these players have played 10 moves in about 3 minutes each, so they know what they're doing. The time they're using is to write down the moves. Uh, Gukesh spends a couple minutes here, just a little bit of time to play the knight forward, and Ding instantly responds with this knight. Interesting move, knight back, challenging this knight, because it was protecting this pawn. So even though black can play the move e5, white takes, black takes back, and then the queen takes this pawn. You don't want to exchange queens because you'll just be down a pawn. Although it'll be doubled, your pawns are much weaker. So for example, if we get takes, yes, you can argue these pawns are doubled. Your pawns are also doubled and they are a problem, and this pawn is isolated. So whites can very easily win all these things back and just have a crushing +1 advantage. So you can't do that. So Gukesh, the only move in the position, queen to g6, threatening this, and you just ignore it as white. You bring your knight forward because after you take, long castles. And although you can offer up a couple more pawns, you are going to face some problems on these files. You've created this problem for yourself. You're going to have to solve it. So Gukesh takes another pawn, and Ding takes on e5 with the pawn. Could have also taken with the queen, uh, but wanted, uh, but that gives up this pawn, which you don't really want to do because then you create a passer, and that's not as good for white. So you take like this, and you X-ray defend like that. Rook b8, threatening some problems on this square. So although you can move your knight out the way to defend it, you've got to be very cautious because if, for example, when we get Gukesh, who thinks for quite some time now, you can see he's down 10 minutes, he goes down even further. He spends another 15 minutes to develop the bishop because there's multiple ways to play this, and you've got to be so precise. So what he is threatening, if white does a nothing move, for example, let's say rook g8, rook g1 rather, they're threatening to take, and that loses because you can't take back because you get mated. So you can't play rook to g8, so you have to play firstly rook d2, attacking the queen, because it doesn't matter if you take the bishop now, I take your queen. And then when the queen slides up, threatening this rook, you slide the rook across to protect this, so that after takes, this pawn is still defended. See how it all flows together? Ding has spent 7 minutes. Most of that has been writing down the moves and walking back to the board after he was ding chilling in his dressing room. Uh, so Gukesh down 40 minutes on the clock, a complete reversal of how the match has gone so far. Queen f5. Queen f5 is not the best move. The best move is rook b d8. This is the move that the computer seems to suggest. It wants to initiate this exchange. Um, if white takes, obviously black takes back and gets a good active rook. But even if white does nothing, you're gonna start trading off pieces and creating play, which is what you need to do. But instead he plays queen f5, and Ding here spends a mammoth 42 minutes. To play the best move, uh, queen takes c6, which allows queen takes e5. So we've got these two isolated pawns in the center of the board, but we've got a 3-on-1 on this side and a 3-on-1 on this side. So whoever will get their pawns rolling first will win. The problem is both sides, where their pawns need to go forward, their king is also there. So there's always going to be counterplay on the king. So these players have played an incredibly sharp opening to get here. It's still level, and there's going to be a massive amount of risk involved if you're going to try and win this position. So Ding Liren in this position plays queen d5. Spend some time, we get queen d5. We get queen to e7, uh, queen d6, queen to g5, queen d5, queen to e7. I think you know where this is going. Queen g5, and Ding Liren. So Gukesh has a draw in his hand. If he wants to play queen e7, he writes it down on the score sheet. The game ends in a draw. It's threefold repetition. We go to the rest day. But Gukesh plays queen h4. He wants to play on. He's threatening the rook, and he's threatening the pawn. He's not threatening it right away because that rook is still defending. So Ding slides his rook. Now he's got a triple up on the d file. Gukesh, calm as ever, gives his king a bit of luft. It does weaken the dark squares a little bit, but it might be important to just avoid back rank problems. Ding Liren immediately looking to take advantage of those dark squared problems, and Gukesh brings his rook, attacking the queen. The queen slides over, offering a queen trade, which Gukesh avoids. It's not going to be beneficial now for him to trade queens, because he would be in a slightly worse rook endgame. So we get queen to f4, and Gukesh slides his queen across the board. Now you can play king to b1, but you kind of want to keep your king near the center, so Ding does make a slight weakness to his light squares by playing the move a3. We get the queen sliding to b5, looking to perhaps infiltrate on these light squares, and Ding says, no, I'm bringing my rook, I'm going to threaten that pawn. So we get the queen infiltrating here. You can't take this pawn anymore because I'm going to cause all sorts of counterplay. So we get rook to d2. The queen moves to f3. And now Ding Liren is in the best position he's had all game. It has risen up from 0.0 a few moves ago to now 0.7. But it is 0.7 for one move, and 0.7 is not a lot. But the other options are, according to this evaluation, significantly worse. Ding Liren would have some winning chances, some very good winning chances maybe, if he can play queen to g3. This is the only continuation that gives white enough advantage to maybe try and press for a win, because you would have queen f1 check, you would have rook d1, and you would have queen to b5. That's what it wants, because you cannot trade. If we go all the way back, trading, it's like 0.7, 0.4. You let the computer think a bit longer, this evaluation goes higher now, 0.5, and it'll just get higher and higher. So we can't have that, but you can't allow the queen exchange, which Ding allows for playing king to c2, and we get takes, and Gukesh now has f4. And just like in his previous game with black, he's got a passed pawn, he's going to try and push, and Ding Liren is now going to have to defend this accuracy. There's always going to be counterplay on the king, because you've pushed so many pawns, but that's if you can get both rooks to the 7th rank. Gukesh won't just let that happen, so we get a very pragmatic move, h4. The reason you do that is because if you play, let's say for example, just a quiet move b4, I say quiet, it does create this problem. G5 is always a problem because you can't take, because these pawns just run away. So Ding makes a practical move with h4, just disallowing g5 for now. You can always still build it up, but by that time Ding would have hoped to create some counterplay. We do get this move e3, which is probably a bit premature. You probably want to keep that pawn here because it's still protected. e3 allows Ding to blockade it, and we get this move, rook to e7. So here it's 0-0-0. Here, rook to e7 once again gives Ding some kind of winning chances. It swings it back in his favor, but uh, that's only if you play rook c4. Don't ask me why. I'm nowhere near good enough to try and explain rook to c4. All I know is Ding brings his king towards the center of the board, which is a very practical move. It's what I would play, although I'm not Ding Liren's strength. You're going to try and win the pawn now, which Gukesh defends. He's like, you can't have the pawn. So Ding Liren makes a very interesting move. He comes up with a very good idea, h5. It is a sacrifice of a pawn, yes, which Gukesh accepts, but you've now split the pawns. And the question will be, will Ding get to that pawn before it races down the board? Uh, so Gukesh threatens to win the f5 pawn, which uh, Ding threatens to win the h5 pawn, the f5 pawn. Gukesh says, go ahead, I'm going to push the h pawn. Ding takes it, and now Gukesh can give the check, and we get king to c7. It's given a great move because the other options are horrible. So it's the only move in the position. We get king to c2, and now we get king to g7. You want to bring the king here. So for example, if you play rook h5, we get king here, takes, and the king is going to walk in and win the day for black, or try to. And there are ways for white to hold this, but this is practically very difficult for white. Gukesh is playing for a win here. So in the game, we get rook g2 check, king here. It's given a great move because the alternative is to go here and to get checkmated in 2 moves. So yes, it's a great move, but it's the only move. So we get king here. You have to go back to blockade the pawn, and like the only way to try and hold this is to just repeat moves and make a draw. So we get 3 draws in a row in this set of 3 games. Tomorrow they'll have a rest day, and there's not much more to say. Ding was pushing with a very sharp opening choice, had Gukesh on the ropes, forced him to think, and then kind of got out the opening, had a time advantage, thought for a long time, and tried to make a draw. Gukesh fought to keep the game alive and ended up kind of pushing a little bit, but there was never anything really for him to push with. His position was not good enough to try and push on for anything more, and the players make a draw. If you liked the video, drop a like below, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't like the video, comment on how I can improve. Subscribe if you want to hear more from me, and I'll see you in a couple days' time for Game 7.